Will the Prime Minister tell us, was Nigel Wright, once again, was he somehow going rogue, or was he acting on the direct instructions of the Prime Minister? What do they mean by sorted out? Why was the Prime Minister getting his fingers into this file?
The Commissioner was very clear that there was no involvement by the Prime Minister in the selection of this project. Mr. Speaker, I always believe that this was a worthwhile project to help improve accessibility for people at the Markham Centre.
A damning report today from the Federal Ethics Commissioner, Mary Dawson. She said that one of the government's top ministers violated the Conflict of Interest Act in 2011. Public Works Minister Diane Finley is under fire for pushing through funding for a Jewish community centre near Toronto. That in spite of concerns from her own department that the centre was a bad candidate for federal funding. Was the decision made for political reasons? And what role did the Prime Minister's office have in picking the project? Joining me now to talk about that, and as you can well imagine, a whole lot more, is Tom Mulcair, the leader of the official opposition and the NDP leader. Good to see you, Mr. Mulcair. Appreciate you being here. Let's start there. There is a lot of different news stories to cover. This was very scathing language from Mary Dawson, who doesn't always have scathing language, let's be honest.
She's very temperate in her approach.
What did you make of her findings in terms of what she had to say about the way Ms. Finley handled this file and what was going on sort of around on the outskirts as well?
She was very tough on Diane Finley, and she said that there were a couple of other ministers involved, and then the usual Conservative cast of characters going back. Nigel Wright's in this one again. And what was interesting is I was looking at the Prime Minister today and I asked him questions, of course, about Pamela Wallin. And the defense he had put up at the time that I quoted back to him about Pamela Wallin was identical to the defense he was putting up today for Diane Finley. So we have this serious breach of ethics, government agencies being hamstrung by political operatives who are trying to tell them how to take their decisions. We live in a society based on the rule of law. The rules are supposed to apply the same to everyone. So there are other worthwhile projects across Canada that were turned down because they were playing a political game with this one.
Ms. Finley makes it clear, though, that she had no personal gain. In fact, she never met the rabbi who was at the center of an intense lobbying pressure.
She's setting up a straw man, better to knock it down, because nobody said it was about personal gain. So she's playing a game when she does that. What she's not mentioning, though, is that there was political gain for the Conservatives, because this was someone who was very close to the Conservative Party. That's the gain that was there, and that's what was illegal in this whole thing. Okay,
we're going to break this down with MPs shortly to get into the details a little bit more for people who may have missed the story. Let's move on to Iraq and of course, the repatriation ceremony for Andrew Doirin, which is happening right now, accidentally killed by the Kurdish Peshmerga last Friday. You have taken, and you did again today, issue with our special forces being on the front line. I just want to show a little bit of what the Prime Minister said in response to you today. Take a listen.
Truth is, of course, the NDP voted against this military mission. Truth is, the Parliament voted for it, Mr. Speaker. The Parliament voted for it because we want to give all the help we can to the brave Kurdish people who are resisting the advance of ISIL and willing to take on the fighting themselves. We're giving them advice and assistance, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we're doing that in a robust way, but we are absolutely following what we said we would do in this Parliament, and we will continue to do so.
I mean, two things. He says that they're following the mandate, advise and assist, and that the mission is robust. Do you think that this is what we signed up for from the get-go?
Sometimes these issues are questions of opinion and debate. Sometimes they're questions of fact. So there are facts involved here. On September 30th, the Prime Minister said clearly that we would not be accompanying the Iraqi troops in any way, shape, or form. I asked him specifically twice in the House of Commons, will we be spotting for airstrikes? Answer categorical, no. And then the actual wording, everybody can check that online and not take anyone's opinion for it. The actual wording of what the House of Commons voted on precludes exactly what we're doing there. So Stephen Harper is not telling the truth to Canadians when he claims that that was in the mandate.
But what is the issue with a mission evolving on the ground if you are trying to fight off ISIS, and the acknowledgement that maybe things do have to change if you are taking on this important battle? What is the problem with the troops adapting to the reality on the ground?
Of course, that would be the Conservative line, right? They'd say that it was an evolving battle, but the fact
well, it's also
of the
what
matter
the Chief
is,
of the Defence Staff says,
well,
to be fair.
you wouldn't be on the line if you were following the mandate given to you by Parliament. They're not supposed to be there. If it's about training and accompanying, it's two different things. Accompanying them to the line is something that was specifically precluded by the Prime Minister himself. Training and advising is something completely different. And all you have to do, Rosemary, to convince yourself of that is to compare the American situation. They wouldn't be allowed to get anywhere near that line without the permission of the President of the United States. Mr. Harper is not allowed to send our troops there without the permission of the Parliament of Canada.
Okay, but is your issue what we're doing, or is your issue that the mission has evolved entirely, or are you just not in favor of what we are doing there, period?
What we've said since the beginning is that all that was ever asked for of Canada by the Iraqis was that we help with the humanitarian crisis. 1.5 million people in Turkey. The Turks keep asking us to give them a hand. In Lebanon right now, there's a severe security threat. George W. Bush's misguided war is the cause of all the tragedies and, frankly, the horrors that we see in this case. Stephen Harper's war, continuing the bombing there, is not in any way, shape, or form going to get us to peace in that region. Canada once played a proud role
surely
working
getting
for
rid
peace in
of
the world.
surely getting rid of ISIS has something to do with the long-term establishment of
Which is
peace.
exactly the same arguments that were used in 2003 by George W. Bush. More bombing will not get us to peace.
Well, what led to the problem was the political vacuum that was left behind. Surely part of the plan to get to peace in Iraq and get rid of ISIS is to eliminate them, as the mission has been set out, and then create the conditions for, a good government that includes everybody and people feel inclusive.
No, the mission is supposed to be about training, isn't it? And that's the whole point. Canadians deserve to be told the truth by their Prime Minister, who has very seldom any obligation as serious as sending people into harm's way. So when Sergeant Douaron was killed behind the front lines by the Peshmergas with whom he was working, it was the proof that we had not followed the mandate given by Parliament. It's as simple as that.
But humanitarian aid isn't going to bring us to peace either.
That's an interesting political argument. What we're talking about, you and I, though, is what the mandate was from the Parliament of Canada.
Yes, but
and
if
the mandate from the Parliament of Canada did not include being on the front line. That's what we're talking about.
But what is your solution then to getting to peace? Because if it's humanitarian aid, surely you recognize that's not going to be enough.
What we're saying is that Canada can play an active, positive role, which is what has been asked of us of the Iraqis. But more bombing is certainly not a road to peace as far as we're concerned.
Okay, I want to move on to Justin Trudeau. He gave a speech last night that a lot of people paid attention to because he called out the government for what he says is anti-Muslim rhetoric. But he also took a particular stance on the government's issue of niqabs, wearing niqabs at citizenship ceremonies. I'll play viewers a little clip of Mr. Trudeau.
It is a cruel joke to claim you are liberating people from oppression by dictating in law what they can and cannot choose to wear.
So the government is appealing this decision that says that niqabs should not be allowed at citizenship ceremonies. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that they should or should not be allowed?
I think that what Canadians should do is actually read the ruling, because it's quite important to understand that all that ruling said is when Jason Kenney pretended that he could overturn a law with his own directive, he's not allowed to do that. It's always been allowed to wear the niqab because everyone had to identify themselves during their citizenship test, and during their swearing in, they were allowed to have it. Jason Kenney decided that he didn't like that anymore, which can be an interesting political debate, but it has to go back to the House of Commons. There's a hierarchy in the rules of law. A statute can't be undone by a minister's diktat, and that's what Jason Kenney tried to do.
Okay, but you're not answering the question. Do you think a niqab should be allowed during a citizenship ceremony or no?
I think that the judge got it right in this case when he said that Jason Kenney's not allowed to overturn the law, which has always allowed it.
So you think it should be allowed?
I think that Canadian law has always allowed it, and that was absolutely in conformity with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as the judge also said.
What do you think of what Mr. Trudeau is alleging there, that the Conservatives are fear-mongering, that this is a dangerous political game they're playing? Do you see that being played out, and would you characterize it in the same way?
I think that there's a dangerous political game being played out by both Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Harper when they use comparisons that are completely outrageous to the Holocaust in both cases. There's an important organization today that is calling out Mr. Trudeau and calling on him to apologize and to withdraw that statement. That is completely out of proportion to anything that has ever happened here in our country, and thank goodness that's the case. So Mr. Harper today throwing out this cultural slander against the whole culture, is decreeing it as being anti-woman, is again what we've started to descend into in this country. And that's being played to by Mr. Harper, who's playing to people's lowest feelings about their neighbors. The role of a Prime Minister is to lift us up, to make us understand that the Charter of Rights is there to defend a journalist's right to say whatever they want, even if we disagree with it, or to let people practice their religion, even if it has nothing to do with how we see the world.
I just want to quickly move on to C-51, because Stephen Blaney called you out today. He said that it was ridiculous for you to say that the bill could give CSIS the power to crack down on legitimate dissent and protest. How do you react? Because it is something that's been raised by others, but he thinks it's ridiculous that you would go around saying that.
Well, there are 100 senior law professors highly respected from across the country who agree with me on that. 4 former Prime Ministers of Canada agree that the bill is completely defective and wrong. We've decided to not only express our opposition to it, but incredibly, vote against it. The Liberals say that they're opposed to it, so that's why they're going to vote for it. We, of course, strongly disagree with that Liberal position as well.
But we have seen in the past couple of weeks 10 Canadians who have gone overseas, we believe, to fight with ISIS. We have seen, and the government always points to, of course, these two events that happened here in Canada. What should be done then to counter what we are seeing? And certainly Bob Paulson admits that this is on the rise, right? There are people increasingly being
Well, there's a missing chapter
recruited.
in that bill. Not only is the scope far too wide because it can capture legitimate dissent and protest by First Nations or environmental groups, but also there's something missing in there, which is a chapter on de-radicalization. Compare with President Obama just a couple of weeks ago in Washington. He brought together faith leaders, he brought together the community leaders, he brought together educators, and he said, we've got to work on an upstream approach, look at the causes and how it's radicalizing young people. Try to find that in Stephen Blaney's bill.
But surely
That's
there's
the
a
missing
legislative
chapter.
aspect as well, so that you can crack down on people before they do something.
Every time I've asked the Prime Minister to give me one single example of something that his bill captures that isn't already in legislation, he can't provide one. You know why? Because that's not what this bill is about.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there.
Good to see you.
Covered a lot of ground. Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Thank you. That's Thomas Mulcair, the leader of the official opposition.